The United States just slapped a hefty tariff on European goods. Now the EU is thinking about hitting back. And they're aiming right for the heart of the American economy, big tech. Companies like Apple, Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, and Intel could be caught in the crossfire. This isn't just a playground spat. The EU is a huge market for these companies. Losing access or even facing restrictions could mean serious financial pain. It's enough to make even the most Zen-tech CEO break a sweat, so buckle up. We're about to delve into the world of tariffs, tech giants, and a transatlantic trade war that could have global consequences. Let's get one thing straight. The EU isn't messing around. They're not some pushover on the global stage. They're a massive economic powerhouse, and they know it. And when it comes to tech, they wield significant influence. Think about it. The EU has over 447 million consumers. That's a lot of potential iPhone buyers and Amazon Prime subscribers. US tech companies rely heavily on this market. Losing it would be a huge blow, potentially costing them billions. The US might be used to throwing its weight around, but the EU is no stranger to a good old-fashioned trade war. They're playing hardball, and they're not afraid to use their market power to protect their interests. So how exactly is the EU planning to target US tech giants? Well, they're looking at a wide range of options. And trust us, none of them are pretty for Silicon Valley. First up, app stores. The EU could make it harder or even impossible for US companies to operate their app stores within the EU. That means no more easy downloads of your favorite apps. Next, cloud services. Everything from data storage to online gaming relies on the cloud. The EU could impose restrictions on US cloud providers, making it more expensive and complicated for European businesses to operate. And let's not forget about data storage. The EU has strict data privacy laws. They could use these laws to target US companies that store European citizens' data, potentially hitting them with hefty fines or even banning them altogether. It's not just the tech sectors themselves that are worried. Specific companies are feeling the heat too, and some of the biggest names in the game are right in the firing line. Apple, the iPhone maker, relies heavily on European sales. Google, the search engine giant, dominates the European market. Amazon, the e-commerce behemoth, has a huge presence in Europe. And Meta, the social media powerhouse, depends on European users for its advertising revenue. Then there's Microsoft, the software giant, and Intel, the chip maker, both with significant operations in Europe. These companies are watching the situation closely, bracing themselves for the potential fallout. The tariffs could force them to raise prices, cut jobs, or even scale back their operations in Europe. And nobody wants to be the CEO who has to explain that to their shareholders. Section 5, the Digital Markets Act, the EU's weapon against big tech dominance. Now, the EU isn't just pulling these tariffs out of thin air. These measures are part of a broader strategy to address the growing influence and market power of major tech companies, particularly those based in the United States. They've been concerned about the power of big tech for a while now, and they've already taken steps to rein them in. Public protests and political debates have highlighted the urgency of the issue, pushing the EU to act decisively. Enter the Digital Markets Act, or DMA. This groundbreaking legislation aims to set new rules for the digital economy, ensuring fair competition and protecting consumer rights. This piece of legislation is designed to curb the dominance of big tech and create a more level playing field for smaller competitors. By doing so, it hopes to foster innovation and give startups a fighting chance in a market often dominated by giants. It gives the EU more power to regulate how these companies operate in Europe. This means stricter oversight and the ability to impose significant penalties for non-compliance. For example, the DMA could force Apple to allow alternative app stores on iPhones. This would give consumers more choices and potentially lower prices for apps and services. It could also prevent Google from giving preferential treatment to its own services in search results. This would ensure that users get the most relevant results, not just the ones that benefit Google. The DMA is a clear sign that the EU is serious about tackling the power of big tech. It's a bold move that signals a new era of digital regulation. And well, the tariffs are just the latest weapon in their arsenal. By combining regulatory measures with economic tools, the EU aims to create a more balanced and fair digital marketplace for everyone. Section 6, Dublin's Tech Hub. A potential casualty of the tariff war. The potential trade war isn't just an abstract economic concept, it has real-world implications. And one place that could be hit particularly hard is Dublin, Ireland. Dublin has become a major tech hub in recent years, attracting giants like Google, Facebook and Apple. These companies were drawn by Ireland's low corporate tax rates and skilled workforce. But the tariffs could change all that. If US tech companies are forced to scale back their European operations, Dublin could be one of the first places to feel the pinch. Thousands of jobs could be lost, and the Irish economy could take a significant hit. It's a stark reminder that trade wars have real-world consequences, and ordinary people often end up paying the price. Section 7, a delicate balancing act. The EU's tariff tightrope. Now, you might be thinking, why doesn't the EU just go all in on these tariffs? Stick it to big tech? Well, it's not that simple. The EU is walking a tightrope here. On the one hand, they want to protect their own interests and send a strong message to the US. On the other hand, they don't want to damage their relationship with their biggest trading partner or harm their own consumers. Remember, European consumers rely on many of these US tech services. Hitting them with tariffs could lead to higher prices, less choice, and a whole lot of frustration. And nobody wants their Netflix subscription to go up because of a trade war. Section 8. The price of protectionism. Will European consumers foot the bill? This brings us to a crucial question. Who will really end up paying the price of these tariffs? On the surface, it might seem like a strategic move to target US tech giants, but the reality is often more complex. While they're aimed at US tech giants, there's a good chance that European consumers will feel the pinch too. Think about it. These companies are deeply integrated into our daily lives, from the smartphones we use to the online services we rely on. If the EU makes it harder for US tech companies to operate in Europe, those companies will likely pass on the increased costs to consumers. This means that the price tags on your favorite gadgets could see a significant hike. That means higher prices for everything from iPhones to Amazon Prime subscriptions. Imagine paying more for the same services and products you use every day. And it's not just about price. The impact could be far-reaching, affecting the very fabric of our tech-driven society. The tariffs could also stifle innovation. US tech companies might become more cautious about investing in new projects within Europe. If US tech companies are less willing to invest in Europe, it could slow down the development of new technologies and services. This could have a ripple effect, impacting job creation and economic growth in the tech sector. So, while the tariffs might seem like a good way to punish US tech giants, European consumers need to be aware of the potential downsides. The cost of protectionism might ultimately be borne by the very people it aims to protect. Section 9. A measured response. The EU's strategy for navigating the trade storm. So what's the likely outcome of all this? The trade tensions between the EU and the US have been escalating, and everyone is on edge. Businesses are worried, consumers are anxious, and policymakers are scrambling to find solutions. Well, the EU is known for its cautious approach. They have a history of carefully weighing their options and considering the long-term impacts of their decisions. They're not going to rush into anything rash. Instead, they'll take their time to analyze the situation from all angles. Instead, they're likely to take a measured response. This means they'll be strategic and deliberate in their actions, ensuring that every move is calculated and thought out. They'll probably implement some tariffs, but these won't be haphazard. They'll be carefully targeted and designed to minimize the impact on European consumers. The goal is to protect the EU's economic interests without causing undue harm to its citizens. At the same time, they'll keep the lines of communication open with the US. Diplomatic efforts will be ramped up to ensure that both sides can find common ground. They know that a full-blown trade war would be in nobody's interests. The economic fallout from such a conflict would be devastating for both sides, so they'll be looking for ways to de-escalate the situation and find a compromise. This might involve negotiations, concessions, and finding mutually beneficial solutions. This is a complex situation with no easy answers. The economic, political, and social ramifications are vast and interconnected, but one thing's for sure. The EU is taking a stand. They're determined to protect their interests and ensure that their voice is heard on the global stage. They're not going to let the US push them around. The EU has significant economic power, and they're prepared to use it if necessary, and they're willing to use their economic might to protect their interests. This might involve leveraging their market size, regulatory power, and economic influence, and that's our show for tonight. We've covered the EU's strategy for navigating the trade storm and what it means for the future. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more insightful analysis of the week's biggest news stories. Stay tuned and stay informed.